It's Pokemon's 30th birthday year. Everyone has their own ways to celebrate. I know you're all dying to hear about mine. You know, I just plan on doing a little bit of whining about Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal. Nothing too crazy. And who doesn't love being reprimanded on their birthday? Onto the video. So, after the big success of the original Pokemon games, Game Freak immediately started development on Gold and Silver. Because when you make $40 million between 4 games in just about 3 years, you may as well be required by the government to make a new game. And that's exactly what Game Freak set out to do. Not just a small expansion like Yellow, but a whole new game and region. So in 1999 in Japan, in 2000 and 2001 everywhere else, people got their hands on the brand new Pokemon Gold and Silver. Like many other games in the franchise, this game has been data mined and leaked to see what used to be in those good old files. Some internet historians, as we'll call them, leaked a lot of the early designs, but also the whole playable demo. What's more interesting are the cut and reworked Pokemon designs that had a chance of being in the game. A lot of them being better than a lot of the duds released this generation. And if you are interested in Pokemon history to any extent, I'd check out any of these videos for more content. I've always really wanted to play Pokemon Crystal, especially when I was younger. When I was a kid, I used to watch the Pokemon playthroughs like it was my job. Every single playthrough I could find, I would be watching someone play through these old Pokemon games. But you all know the classic saying, what a man wants is to play with pixelated monsters on a shitty screen. And I live by that. So I'm going to be playing and going over Pokemon Crystal, plus the Generation 2 games as a whole. I'm not just going to be talking about the Pokemon battles or what new Pokemon I liked, but everything that felt significant enough to be put into a video. Like, to start, let's talk about the new things this game added to the franchise first, because it's a lot. Not only is there new Pokemon to find, but also new types added to help the game with the balance. In Gen 1, Psychics ruled the game, having no real weakness, unless you used a bug move, which was guaranteed to do a whole lot of nothing in Gen 1. So the Dark and Steel types were introduced to get rid of those pesky Psychic types, and to help balance with the other types in the game. So overall was great for the franchise, as going back to before the introduction of these types feels like a bad alternate timeline. Quick! I don't have much time! Do you guys still have Dark and Steel type Pokemon? No. We do have free healthcare and flying cars, though.
No!
So, of course you can get a bunch of Dark and Steel type Pokemon. Oh, I couldn't even finish that sentence. You can maybe get 2 or 3 Pokemon that had the new types during the main adventure. Continuing Game Freak's record of making bonehead decisions. But those weren't the only additions to the games, as a real-time internal clock was added, having the current day and time of the real week. This can affect what Pokemon show up at certain times of the day, and also certain days of the week. Certain Pokemon evolutions and events are tied to this. Your only chance to get the new Eevee evolutions and Lapras are through this feature. One of the other big additions was adding genders to the Pokemon, giving each Pokemon a chance to be male or female, and depending on the species, you have a higher or lower chance to get one. It's just funny how they didn't originally have this in the games. I'm sure it probably would have been way too hard to program at the time, but just having a genderless Mr. Mime is a little creepy. In Game Freak being the dubious dogs they are, they just couldn't help themselves and put breeding into the game. This lets your Pokemon do the hanky-panky and pop out some eggs with baby Pokemon. These Pokemon can have special moves gifted by either of their parents. It's also commonly used to try and get shiny Pokemon. Shinies are just the same Pokemon, but their color is different and they get a nice sparkle. People go insane trying to get shinies, with a chance of 1 in 8,192 just to see one. And if you get unlucky, you cannot encounter another one for months. These games added so many concepts that are just regular inclusions to newer games. Not to mention smaller things like the revamped stats, with it now being special attack and special defense instead of just a special stat. Game Freak also gets kudos for adding the first female protagonist of the series in Crystal with Chris. The Pokemon also start freaking moving when they get thrown out of the ball. The leaps they took in such a little amount of time to go from a decent RPG with amazing monster designs to an actually engaging and fun RPG with amazing monster designs is crazy. While Gold, Silver, and Crystal did introduce a lot of mechanics to the series, that isn't enough to make you a fan favorite. What people get nostalgic for and what people remember are the region. And Johto is an amazing region. But I'm not concerned about the region. I'm concerned about the gambling in the game corner, baby. Man, I got so many fat stacks from that thing. Look! Johto is maybe the best designed region in all of Pokemon. Roll credits. No, but really, everywhere in Johto feels lived in through the design of the cities and towns, as well as the music complementing them. While Kanto is nostalgic for it being the first, its design doesn't feel incredibly cohesive. While nothing is bad, I don't feel anything walking into the cities of Kanto. What Kanto was missing was some vibes, and something tying it all together to make it feel cohesive. In comparison, Generation 2 had a theme and direction for the entire region. A lot of these places feel more dreary and downplayed. Towns like Violet City, Ecruteak, and Blackthorn City are all deeply connected to the past. They have real history from their architecture being worn down, the burnt tower and ruins of Alf. And I think the music is a big reason why this region is so loved. Johto takes a much more calm approach to its music. Most of the tracks are relaxing when just traveling through the region. This adventure isn't as high stakes as many other Pokemon games are either, so the more dreary music fits perfectly. And with the Game Boy's lovely graining on the audio, that gives it a more nostalgic feeling, even if this is your first time playing through the games. Johto isn't the only region in the game, however. They also added all of Kanto back. Okay, all of Kanto is a bit of an overstatement. It's more like Kanto's greatest hits, featuring some Johto Pokemon. There's a reason for that though. The cartridge just wasn't big enough to support both regions. So Satoru Iwata, the Nintendo president at the time, had to come and help the team of Gold and Silver compress the game onto the Game Boy Color cartridge. A lot of things in Kanto had to be shortened or just straight cut. Mount Moon used to be this expansive multi-layered cavern. Now, you can just walk through it in less than 100 steps to get out. The whole region is downsized, which I actually don't mind. Maybe because I find Kanto boring and lifeless already. Scaling back the post-game makes sense. You just spent 20 to 30 hours playing through Johto, a very packed region with a lot of content. Having to go through another 20 to 30 hours with Kanto, while it would have been fun, I think would have left a lot of gamers with a sense of bloat. Instead, they had the post-game only being around 5 to 10 hours, with your only goal in most towns is to immediately fight the gym leader and then leave, since there isn't much else to do. You can talk with the NPCs in every town, a lot of them aren't going to give you anything anyways. I mean, obviously, I would have loved if they were able to bring back Kanto in its entirety, bringing back all the things you were able to do in the first games with adding new content to it. But I'm not greedy. I understand when they have control. But for the next games, they better have voice acting, they better add new sprites, they better add new types, they better add complimentary chocolates, because what's a game without some complimentary chocolates? I need that. Now, Generation 2 did something that would become a staple in every later game. When Pokemon first started, it was just about making some cool looking creatures. Give a rock arms, who gives a fuck? Gen 2 changed that by making Pokemon that actually fit the region they live in. These guys feel connected to Johto, instead of feeling like they were pasted on top of a already made region. The Pokemon feeling so different from Kanto was a great idea, while the philosophy was still to take an animal and spruce them up a bit, that you put personality into the designs. Examples like Hoot Hoot and Stantler fit this. Certain characteristics like overemphasizing one part of them, Stantler's antlers, or giving them a unique gimmick like Hoot Hoot's 1 foot, makes them feel much more like Pokemon. The best Generation 1 designs did this, while almost all of Gen 2's Pokemon do this. Now, did all of them turn out great? All designs have a right to exist, even if they're butt ugly. It isn't all sunshine and rainbows for the Johto region. There is major problems with the Pokemon, but it's not their designs. It's the availability and usability. Because if you want to use half of the new Pokemon, too flippin' bad. A lot of the Pokemon aren't available at all during the first 8 badges. They're hidden in the post game, and not easily available either. You need to really love these guys to even find them, since they're so hard to get, or unable to get at all. Hey man, do you happen to know where Slugma spawned? Nah man, I don't really get into politics like that. What do you mean you don't care? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Sadly, a lot of the Pokemon weren't able to catch their stride until later generations, where they got evolutions and stat changes. Not only because a lot of them were hard to get, but also a lot of them are just painfully bad. Half of the new 100 introduced in the region are super weak, like barely usable weak. Since they decided almost every Pokemon should have mid-lane stats and a terrible moveset, a lot of the issues come from the move list, because you can make weaker Pokemon work. But if they simply have no good way to play, there's nothing you can do except to wait like the little good boy you are for a buff or an evolution that will never come. Gen 1 still dominates a lot of the decks, with many of the new designs in Johto being related to those former Gen 1 Pokemon. Evolutions pre-evolutions are given to many of the original 151, being the first time we see in-between generation evolutions. And this must have been such a joy to see for the first time. I mean, imagine loving Golbat to see them just 2 years later get a sleek new design in Crobat, or imagine absolutely hating Jinx and seeing this abomination spawn from the depths of Tartarus. Even with Gen 1's a large influence, Johto has many standout Pokemon all on their own. The starters, at least design-wise, are all great here. The designs, while simple, have a lot of personality. I would say keeping all of them monotype did limit their design potential a little bit. I could easily see a world where these designs have minor tweaks and got Ghost, Fire, Water, Dark, and Grass Psychic designs. Besides my fanfiction, Johto has so many great designs. But I would dare to say the true standouts are the box art legendaries. These games are in the idea of the games being tied to the dork on the front of your box. These box art covers would have given anyone a hard choice at the time. Do I want to be broke and have no friends? Or do I want to be broke and have no friends with a gold box? Sick ass poses for their respective covers are much more appealing than just standing against a solid background like many of the other legendaries love to do. Like I've said multiple times, these games just have a certain vibe around And I think the covers are the first step to this, as the legendaries are both inviting, like the region itself being a much more relaxing adventure than many other RPGs or even Pokemon games would be. Pokemon games are personal journeys though, and I haven't talked a lick about my own adventure or my experiences. And since everyone in the crowd is dying to hear what I have to say, I mean, I guess I could talk about myself a little bit if that's okay. Another adventure, another round of me building my team around some weirdos. I love being able to use some of the weaker and more forgotten about Pokemon of a region, as playing with weaker Pokemon leads to much more hype moments and nail-biting finishes. Yay! Yay! But their ass. So my team this time consists of Meganium, Azumarill, Ursaring, Mischievous, Xatu, and Magcargo. This team actually wasn't too bad. Part to do with Johto just being a pretty easy adventure, but others have been calling me the Muhammad Ali of Pokemon playthroughs, so you be the judge. Starting with Meganium, and sadly, they really aren't good in this game. They were really slow, they had no great moves, and since grass is horrifically weak in this game, they fainted a lot. But no Pokemon is all bad though. He was really good as a setup user against more powerful Pokemon, with moves like Poison Powder and Reflect. While Meganium isn't a great attacking Pokemon, using them for more setup and niche roles is definitely what you'll have to do if you do want to use this big plant dinosaur. Ursaring's role was not niche though. It was to attack like crazy. They were my most consistent team member. Through every step of the game, if they were called upon, they would step up, as normal type moves are really underrated to use in the main story Pokemon games. Being just effective against every type means you can always do really good damage to your enemy. And Ursaring was way too strong at times, sweeping through major trainers' teams like a bear licking a honey pot. Azumarill had similar success. While not having the great attack stats like Ursaring, it made up for it in HP. It could take almost anything with that big belly. Azumarill was my wall of water. If you catch my Drifloon. You guys like my new laugh? I had no complaints with Azumarill. They hit hard, absorbed damage, and they were cute as a button. Speaking of cute as a button, we have my illegal Mischievous. I didn't figure Mischievous would be any good at all, honestly. Having the second lowest stats of any of my Pokemon. Gross. Plus, not being particularly great at anything made me feel really unconfident. But now I've learned never to doubt a girl boss, as Mischievous was often my second best Pokemon, using her to finish off weaker Pokemon and then confuse and Shadow Ball spam them. She went against some of the titans in the game, and held her own really well. Now, are most of these incredibly lucky? Luck's a skill too, buddy. Deal with it. Speaking of luck, Xatu is one of the unluckiest Pokemon in all of Johto, as we've officially reached the less desirable team members. Xatu's biggest problem was no psychic moves at all. I don't even know why Game Freak would let you use Xatu, considering you get nothing until level 36 with the Future Sight. But don't worry, bud. Your next good move will come in 30 more levels. So Xatu is basically impossible to use as you want it to, because you get no psychic moves. And when it did eventually learn psychic, it was way better. Actually letting Xatu does what he does best. Be confusing. Leave the slowest Pokemon for last is Magcargo. Now, did I maybe hack the game to give myself an underleveled Pokemon? Yeah, but you would have done the same thing. See, I've actually used Magcargo before and it's bad. Terrible stats for its fire and rock type, incredibly slow, plus with 4 weaknesses, he barely ever gets to move. And when he does get to move, he's already at half health due to his weak speed and his weak defenses. His attack stats aren't anything to really write home about either. He can't kill a lot of Pokemon that you think he'd be able to with a fully powered flamethrower. So why'd I choose him? Hey Slag. There's been so much talk about me and my freaks that I haven't been able to talk about one of the biggest parts of Pokemon, and that's the battling in the gym leaders. I mean, it isn't a Pokemon game without turn-based battles. Am I right, guys? Right. I think everyone already has a pretty decent idea of how battling works within the Pokemon series. Type advantages and disadvantages in the name of the game, and targeting them often leads to success. So of course I picked the weakest of the 3 starters for my adventure, to have the toughest battles possible against both my rival and the gym leaders. And the early game isn't anything to really write home about. I had 3 Mons that had barely any super effective moves against a lot of the early game Pokemon, and they handled it just fine. Once you reach the mid game, however, the levels spread out, since you're given some freedom to go in any direction you want. I even found my underachieving and underloved party was still able to glide through the middle portion of the game. Now, that's not to say there are no tough battles throughout. Bugsy, great name by the way, can sneakily wipe your team if you don't stop his Scyther, which I did not. Whitney is always a challenge if you aren't prepared for her super chunky milk tank, which I was not. And Jasmine's new steel types can steamroll any team with her tanky Steelix, which I would let Jasmine steamroll me if you know what I mean. Hey yo! Put your hand down, you freak. That's fair. Like, why does Shuck only have 2 Pokemon when Morty and Bugsy both have more than him? And his Pokemon aren't especially strong either. Or Price, who is most people's 7th gym leader, is comically weak. They're also still using Kanto Pokemon, for goodness sake. These bad teams spread throughout the game though. The nameless leader of the reformed Team Rocket has a whole lot of wow, nothing. Even your rival after the first few battles gets way easier as you gain access to new Pokemon and types. Nor does his team have a real consistent theme to it besides vague evilness. The game doesn't feel like it had much of a design focus on how people would actually explore the region with the trainers, nor what Pokemon should be represented throughout the region to promote the new ones. Then there's the dreaded level curve that makes the game go from pretty easy and fun to a grind fest to catch up with the Elite Four. The Elite Four, like the gym leaders, aren't too engaging here. 2 out of the 4 members are really unthreatening until Karen, depending on what your team makeup is. And they all have, say it with me folks, poorly made teams. While Karen gets a pass because she's known to only win with her favorites, the rest don't. Will's the worst offender, having 2 Zatus? Not even one of the other 3 underused new psychic Pokemon, but 2 Zatus. Koga having 3 bugs means that he could never be a real threat to you anyways. And then there's Bruno, who said he's using some of the strongest Pokemon, but uses Hitmontop and well-known weaker than Caterpie Onix. While half of the Elite Four doesn't live up to their title, there's one more challenge left, as calling it the Elite 5 would be insanity. And your final battle is against the most 5 out of 10 champion in Lance, the Dragon type master. This battle is tough. Not only does he use the biggest power attacks in the game like he's a 6-year-old, but he also has multiple Pokemon unattainable to the player that are way higher level than you. This only makes Lance a challenge, but not something that feels entirely fair to the player. I think having under-leveled evolved Pokemon, while it is something that is seen in Johto, just shouldn't be used for the final champion battle. You could have just had the level curve be better than it was to get these Dragonites up just a few more levels, or maybe just giving him one massive Dragonite that's higher leveled than the rest of the Elite Four. It just makes it seem like he hacked all of his Pokemon in instead of, you know, raising it like everyone else. But the game doesn't end there like most Pokemon games would. You still need to take on all of Kanto, and it's 8 gym leaders. A very quick talk about the Kanto gym leaders. They aren't very strong, and I don't think a lot of them are worth talking about. While I do think it's cool to see their new designs and their new teams 2 years later, they just don't really do anything. A lot of them are just standing in their gyms like they were before. The only one you really interact with outside of the gym is Misty. And that's only a 2-second conversation before you're back to fighting her. And it's not like any of them compare to the Elite Four in terms of strength, so it's pretty easy to just... Finally talking about the real final boss of the game, which is Red. It's so cool to see the developers even thought to put him into the game as the secret final boss, actually making the games feel like you did good work in your previous adventure, with the fight with Red being one of the hardest fights in the whole series. There's almost no way you can come close to his level unless you did a ton of grinding between Kanto's end in this fight, and you will struggle against basically every Pokemon that he has, even if you think you have the advantage on them. There's super overleveled Pikachu that can take out at least one of your Pokemon before going down. He has all 3 of the original starters plus Snorlax, which are crazy high stat Pokemon. Plus there's a 100 billion% chance he'll just wipe out one of your Pokemon instantly with just one move. But for an endgame secret boss, that's awesome. Seeing a former champion just chilling with the strongest Pokemon in the game, and it being former you, makes it very hard to not think it's one of the coolest things ever. I believe I've covered everything related to Gold, Silver, and Crystal. From the greatly needed new mechanics, the incredibly vibrant region, the awesome and terribly weak new Pokemon, as well as the biggest battles that you're going to face during your time playing. Overall, these games added so many things to the franchise that it'd be blasphemous for me not to consider them classics. Even if these games have some pretty big shortcomings, like the level curve that is atrocious, as well as the design choices for a lot of teams, it doesn't mean these games aren't fun. So, happy 30th birthday, Pokemon, and I'll see you guys later. Bye bye!